On Monday, Windsor reaffirmed its Housing Accelerator Fund submission at Council in hopes to access $40 to $70 million in federal funding. The application prioritizes four-by-right zoning in certain wards and neighborhoods and along certain transit routes and corridors, but it's potentially already jeopardized at the outset because the federal government wants to have fourplex of right zoning throughout the entire city. We're in a kind of intractable situation here. The situation has evolved because when it was first submitted, there was not a requirement for fourplex by right throughout the entire city. However, we're in a different place now than we were when that submission went through. Joining me to discuss is Councillor Kieran McKenzie from Ward 9, who was one of three councillors who voted no to the submission. Kieran, how you doing?
I'm doing well, John. How about you? Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. So I guess we know how you voted. Why did you not vote to reaffirm the submission?
Because what came through, and I appreciate that we're to have the opportunity to chat with you about this. So the submission that the City of Windsor has put forward with respect to the Housing Accelerator Fund application, we knew. It was well understood. It came out in the first meeting that we had in December, as well as in the meeting that we just had last week, that if the city was not committing to bringing forward a bylaw that would allow 4 units by right on all residentially zoned lots in the community, that our application would not be successful. It's a full stop there. So we can debate the extent to which, and I'm open to, and I've been having this debate, but we can debate the risk around allowing 4 by right on all residential lots in terms of infrastructure impacts and in terms of neighborhood character. And I'm very open to those debates. But what was made very clear was 4 by right is, to use the mayor's term, the ticket to entry into the eligibility for Housing Accelerator Fund dollars. There's a number of other features of an application that the city has proceeded with as well that would need that need to be a component of the application if you want to be successful in leveraging those funds. But 4 by right was the ticket to entry, and it was my view that given the amount of money that was being made available, $40 million, and given the fact that the City of Windsor, by all accounts, no disagreement across the board, administration, any one of my colleagues, regardless of how they voted on half, all acknowledge that we are in a housing crisis in our community. And the federal government making those funds available specifically to deal with housing supply issues in the community. It was too much money given that would address probably the most important, if not anyone's top 3 most important issues that we're dealing with. So my vote was to hopefully come forward that the city would bring forward a stronger application to the federal government in order to be able to leverage the up to, or perhaps even more than $40 million that was being made available to our community.
Well, things are obviously where they are with the vote as it stands. It's been resubmitted, and we've got both the federal government and now city council on entirely opposite sides, about as far away from each other as you can get on an issue. Do you think that the feds are going to budge at all, or is this an outcome that's, preordained and we're sort of in a theater right now with this resubmission?
No, I don't think that they're going to. And it's not just my opinion. I'm basing my opinion on what our administration has told me, the feedback that I've gotten in discussions with our federal member of parliament, what I've heard from the minister in public discussion that he's had on the Housing Accelerator Fund, and in the scope of the debate that's happened in other communities. Just notably recently, Oakville, for example, had a very contentious discussion around this very issue of 4 by right. And it came down to a close vote, but they ultimately, under the understanding that if they did not enact the bylaw, that they wouldn't be eligible for the funding, chose to commit to enacting a bylaw. And by the way, there's 28 other communities who have agreed to enacting a 4 by right bylaw in their communities in order to be able to be eligible for those funds. And look, there's I recognize that it's a change, and it's a change where some people have around the council table and in the community have expressed concerns. There's also some people in the community at least for my part, an equal number, at the very least equal, perhaps even more so, in favor of us making this change, because people recognize that we are in a housing crisis and we need to deal with housing supply in order to address some of the challenges we're seeing in the community with precarious housing, unhoused folks, homelessness, addiction, and all those different things that are the fallout when you don't have sufficient and appropriate housing for people in the community in which you live.
So the arguments against fourplex-by-right throughout the city is that it's going to overwhelm the infrastructure that we have right now, whether it be parking or whether it be sewer systems because of increased people. The fact of the matter is, though, when you look to many neighborhoods throughout the city, I get comments in often here at AM 800 from Forest Glade area of reports of, 16, 17, 18 people living in a house already. I don't see how this change from threeplex to fourplex by right, as threeplex by right is how it is right now throughout the city and the province. I don't see how it could overwhelm something that in many cases already exists.
You're 100% correct. So it's a really good point. And I asked this question to the engineer on Monday. If you had the same number of people living on one residential property, 20 people living in a fourplex, 20 people living in a single detached residential home, 4-bedroom house, what's the impact or the risk to the infrastructure? Is it the same? Is it less? Is it more? He says it's essentially the same. The only one caveat being it's depending on whether or not that that fourplex actually has more hard surface on the property than a single detached house. Then you might see some more stormwater runoff, making it into the sewer system rather than it being just absorbed into the ground. That's a fair point. But here's fundamentally where I take issue with the risk profile assessment. It's around the number of units that would be converted from a single detached home to a fourplex and the time frame under which that would happen. The presumption is that if we move to 4-by-right, in order for that risk profile from an infrastructure standpoint to emerge, that would, and our city engineer stipulated this, you would have to see a widespread conversion of homes, places where people currently live, converted from a single detached home into a fourplex. So that two things there. Number one, financially prohibitive. To tear down your house that you live in, and then to build a fourplex on that same property, you're into a 7-figure project easily. And most of the time, for most people, if they wanted to do some kind of conversion project or improvement to their home or triplex or something like that, the asset that they're borrowing against is their home. So you're going to tear down the asset that would allow you to leverage the capital to build the thing. That's not happening. It doesn't make sense that that's a risk. And then on top of it, again, that's where they live. Are people really looking to turn their house into an income property where they have a home that is a 3-bedroom, whatever it might be, into one apartment in a fourplex? I don't think so. There will be some conversions, and that will certainly happen. But the fact that it'll happen in such a degree and with such frequency that it would put pressure on our infrastructure is absurd. It's absurd. It's not a risk. So let's set that piece aside. The second argument that people have been raising, and maybe you were going to ask the question, but it's around neighborhood character, and we can get into that discussion if that's the place you want to go as well.
Sure.
So on the neighborhood character front, the idea that a fourplex somehow fundamentally alters the neighborhood, the way that the neighborhood that you live in. Okay, so going back to your example, John, of the idea that, there's many places across the city, South Windsor, Forest Glade, you name it, because of the housing crunch that we're in and the lack of availability of appropriate housing, you're seeing overcrowding in a lot of single detached homes. 10 to 20, 15, whatever it might be, people living in a 3 or 4-bedroom house. So that affects neighborhood character as well. All right. So which affects neighborhood character more? Let's think about that. And especially when you think about it's only going to happen in, I think very gradually and in a very measured way. Is the neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood affected by 20 people in a 3-bedroom home or fourplex appropriate housing that is newly built, where people and people presumably are living in a place that's built to accommodate the lifestyle that they want to live, and that becomes what's built into the neighborhood. To me, I think there's a change. I'm not saying there's not a change, but change being the only constant, and especially with people coming to our community en masse, we're seeing population increases like we've never seen before in our history. There are going to be some changes.
I can appreciate that, and we are already seeing massive changes throughout the city. Quite frankly, I want to shift gears a little bit more to the dollars and cents here. 40 million or up to 70 million, but let's just call it 40. Odds of reaching the 70 were pretty outlandish. It's a lot of money, and Windsor has, quite frankly, a lot of infrastructure needs that are coming up. Just back of the napkin math, mega hospital servicing, call it 250, and again, these are all numbers today that'll be bigger when it actually happens because of inflation and all that fun that happens. So mega hospital 250, Sandwich Southlands 400, bus garage Mahal 300 million. Just at council, there were for 2024 budget priorities, not allocated money now or even up to 10 years. There was like 300 projects that were identified, including Victoria and University imagining. That's $350 million. And again, these are just ones that are at the top of my head. Right there is about $1.5 billion. $40 million is a bit of a drop in the bucket when it comes to 1.5 billion, but it's still $40 million. Can we really afford to say no?
I don't think we can, but it's important to understand that $40 million isn't to create or to make the investments to build all those things. That $40 million could be used for a lot of things, and some of it could be bricks and mortar. But other pieces and those challenges, by the way, that you outlined, John, another way to look at it is opportunities. Those are growth related, right? So when you have these growth related challenges, that means you're growing, you're going to increase revenue because of that growth. But you can only increase the revenue if you have housing, because that's where we make our money on property tax. So if more people are coming and they're opting to live in the city of Windsor, and the investments are happening in the city of Windsor, those things that need to be funded, the roads that need to be expanded or created in order to make room and the servicing costs for land that's currently undeveloped, the city is going to recoup those funds over time because those investments are going to go forward. And I'm prepared to bet on ourselves. I think our future is bright. And by the way, those population numbers that keep increasing, they're increasing because other people, not only in the city of Windsor, outside of the city of Windsor, say, geez, there's a lot of great opportunity here in Windsor. I'm coming here. I'm going to be part of that success story. So we're going to generate the funds to be able to sustain that growth. The choices that we have right now as a council is, are we going to make the investments to make sure that as that growth is occurring, we're leveraging it to the maximum degree possible. So making those investments in the roads and sewers and appropriate housing, and $40 million helps to get us there, especially if it's new money coming from outside of the city of Windsor tax base, federal dollars coming to our city to help us address housing need during a housing crisis. And the majority of our council is fighting to say no to that. I think we're making a mistake.
Ward 9 Councillor Kieran McKenzie, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I really do appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for addressing this issue, John.